All right, so we'll change the subject to something that normally is very interesting to everyone: money. And I somehow also, by taking on the presentation about funding of pharmacovigilance, I can feel your expectations that he will tell us where to find the money. I suspect that I will make you all disappointed. But hopefully I can perhaps give you some tips how you might go about it and what others have done to get funding. No one has got enough funding, I can tell you. So what I will talk about a little bit of background and then some what it is that needs funding. We can talk about public funding, direct and indirect, and donor funding, and how to form partnerships. And then I also wish to give you an idea of perhaps starting some crowdfunding. I don't think that will solve the situation either, but it's a modern term these days. And I have been in pharmacovigilance long enough to realize that a lot of people have started pharmacovigilance really with a shoestring budget, almost with nothing, because they felt that there was a job that had to be done. They were engaged because they saw people being affected, and they have often been in healthcare or in academia, and they've used the margins of the resources of those institutions to start reporting. You design a reporting form and you get in touch with your colleagues in healthcare and you ask them to report. It doesn't take much at all to get to that level. You can do it with very little money. And somehow I think we have also been burdened by that, because then others in society have expected that this reporting can be done without any funding, because they did it. But there is a long way from that and to the situation where we are now in very many countries, where pharmacovigilance is a regulatory activity governed by policies and laws. And then in order to manage that, of course, we need to have regular, sustainable funding. Otherwise, it just cannot be done. So it's a long way from this humble start with a piece of paper of a reporting form that you send with the general mail to something that is a system. It's a real, regular system in society and in healthcare. And also involving not only healthcare professionals, but now the general public, all the pharmaceutical industry, and so on. It's become big. And it requires big money. What is it we need funding for? Well, you can, of course, differentiate between fixed costs. Talking about infrastructure, you buy equipment, software, computers. You need baseline training for the people who are going to serve in the system. And also you can have fixed costs for certain activities, certain projects. And then you have the recurring costs, like salary for people. They come every month. You need that. Rent for your premises and the supplies you need. Travel, you always need to travel. You cannot just sit in an office and communicate with your partners. You have to perhaps travel internationally or nationally. You have to run training and workshops, because this is what pharmacovigilance is all about. You have to interact, communicate, and that also, of course, require recurring costs, and you have to budget for that. Communication is an essential part of what we do. And you can get some estimates in the Pharmacovigilance Toolkit. Have you heard of that already? No? This toolkit is maintained by our WHO collaborating center in Accra in Ghana. It's a great tool. You can find all kinds of tips and facilities and documents and guidelines. Whatever you want to do in pharmacovigilance, there will be first stop shop there. And from there you can get tips to many other sources of information. And they also have a kind of a mock budget for country XYZ. I take no responsibility for the accuracy of the figures here, but at least it's a kind of a starting point. And there is also this sample annual budget for spontaneous reporting in Ghana, where you have, it's actually longer than this. You have a statement of the objective, rationale, expected output, the cost, and the justification. So you can have some guidance from there, how you might go about your budgeting. And then if we look at the way pharmacovigilance is being funded in countries, those who are lucky, they have a direct budget line for pharmacovigilance from the government. And I'm thinking here about the difference it made in India when in 2010 there was a budget line introduced for pharmacovigilance specifically. And all of a sudden they knew how much money they had, and they were free to use it, or they had to use it. And not all that money countries have that very specific situation where the government on that level have said that pharmacovigilance is a national priority, and this is what we allocate. But the next level is that you have an indirect budget. You have often a budget for the regulatory authority. And then to supplement that, you have terms of reference for the authority saying you are charged with the task of organizing pharmacovigilance, right? So that means that there will be a budget through that overall budget for the authority. The other way of doing that is to introduce a right to charge a fee for pharmacovigilance services. And I will show you such a solution, although it has not been fully implemented yet, but European Union, as far as I know, is the first authority to take that step to introduce a pharmacovigilance fee for services for marketing authorization holders. So we will look at that. So what are the pros and cons? Well, direct funding gives a certain level of stability, because that means that the government has on that level made a strategic decision that safety is of medicines is a long-term strategic goal. And then they're normally not changing that very often. And it's even though there might be a risk when the political you change the party that is in charge, it takes a level of commitment from their side to remove that. So normally they just fill in that budget line and they don't cut it. But the problem I see here with direct funding, it's very hard to influence because it's decided by politicians, which you sometimes, at least in my country, you don't have all that easy access to. And the government, they are hard to influence. So if you feel that you're getting too little, it might be hard to change that. And indirect funding, the decision makers are more accessible that would be the managers of your regulatory authorities. And if you have your pharmacovigilance center in the regulatory authority, you might at least know these people who are making the decision. You might be able to influence them. But on the other hand, you are vulnerable because the authority might have financial losses in one part of the organization. And it's very common that they feel that, well, pharmacovigilance, there is really no one is noticing if we cut it down. There will be still marketing authorizations can still be running and the clinical trials can still be running. If we get some fewer adverse reactions, no one will notice. So it's very easy to cut down on pharmacovigilance for them. So that's a bit of a worry in that situation. Let's then look at charging pharmacovigilance fees. And that's what the European Union did in this regulation from 15th of May last year. And they have a fee for the procedures of the European Medicines Agency, which are applicable from the 26th of August 2014. So it's quite new. And the annual fee that they have instituted, they will be valid and only from this year, 1st of July. So we don't know fully how this works out. But they charge fees for certain services, like assessment of PSURs, periodic safety update reports, or periodic benefit risk evaluation reports. I will be using a lot of acronyms, so please scream if you don't know what they are. And also assessment of post-authorization safety studies and safety referrals. There are very specific activities of the authority that they will charge from the pharmaceutical industry. The annual fee is there to cover the maintenance of the IT system and also to monitor the relevant scientific literature. And to understand this, you need to know what the previous process was. Before 2012, or before, well, the new legislation came into force, all marketing authorization holders were mandated to follow all scientific literature relating to all safety issues on their products, which means that all generic manufacturers having the same substance or the same product, they were doing exactly the same activity, monitoring the literature. And then the authority felt that this is perhaps not the best way of doing it. We will do it centrally, and we'll charge a fee to all the marketing authorization holders instead. So that's the background to that one. Fees are only applicable to products authorized on a national level, not centralized. I don't know, not all of you will know how the authorization process works in European Union, but you can have products both authorized for the whole Union on a centralized level, or you can do it nationally. The centralized products, they already have a fee that includes pharmacovigilance costs. So that's why this one is here. And there are also exemptions for herbals and homeopathics. And there are reductions for small and middle-sized enterprises to make sure that they are not burdened with the same cost as the big dragons. And then they have something called chargeable unit, and it's based on, well, for each marketing authorization holder, how many active substances they have, a name of the product there, and the pharmaceutical form there, and the what is that? Oh, how many countries they have the product in. And that ends up with a chargeable unit. Complicated. We'll come to it later on, where it explains where this fits in. And then they have this way of reducing fees for medium-sized, small and micro companies, based on headcounts or annual turnover or the annual balance sheet total, right? It's important to get the fees right, otherwise they will complain. And here is the summary table. So for a single assessment of a periodic safety update report, the standard fee is 19,500 euros. And then exempt for micro enterprises, 60% reduction for small and medium-sized enterprises. Assessment of a post-authorization safety study, 43,000. Assessment of pharmacovigilance referral, 179,000. And then we come to this annual fee, which is then the fee for maintenance of the database and for the literature checking. That is 67 euro per chargeable unit. So that's where this previous table of how you calculate the chargeable unit comes in. All right. I wanted to show you this, perhaps not for you to copy, but to get a feeling for how you might construct a fee system. Of course, in Europe, they will have very high fees because it covers all the 28 member countries of the European Union, but you will have to adapt these fees. But I just feel that the principle of charging for pharmacovigilance services is now established. And if it's established and accepted by the pharmaceutical industry in this part of the world, it should be possible to extend that principle to other parts as well. You can always refer to say, aha, they have it in Europe. And of course, the positive side of this is that if you have a pharmacovigilance fee, you have some kind of contract with the marketing authorization holder. They are paying for it, so the pharmacovigilance services have to be delivered. Otherwise, the companies will complain. But the revenues are possibly variable because it depends on the activities of the marketing authorization holders, how many PSURs you will have, and how many referrals or what have you. Now, I wish to turn to donor funding, right? And the reason for the donor interest is that they have seen the need to invest heavily in the major diseases. And the major diseases are in public health programs, are particularly malaria, HIV/AIDS, and tuberculosis. And they want to do it responsibly. And responsibly means that you do not just distribute medicines everywhere, not caring about what's happening and not caring about how the public and the patients are doing. And the concern is also that because investments have been made in product development in public health programs, we have invested in new vaccines. There is a malaria vaccine coming in, dengue fever vaccine is coming in. We have new medicines in tuberculosis, the first ones for 40 years. And they are being introduced in countries with weak surveillance systems. Then we also have something called the WHO Global Vaccines Action Plan, adopted by World Health Assembly, I think 3 years ago or something. And it has in it something called the Vaccine Safety Blueprint, and that has translated into an activity called the Global Vaccine Safety Initiative, GVSI. And because of this structure, there are also donors who take an interest in investing in vaccine safety. All right. Now I'm moving too fast. So particularly these donors have played a major role, or are definitely engaging in pharmacovigilance funding. Global Fund I will talk more about. Unit Aid, they fund pharmacovigilance activities mainly through WHO, but not exclusively. Then we have PEPFAR, the President's initiative, the US President's initiative against HIV/AIDS. They have also invested in pharmacovigilance. We have the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and we have the Global Alliance for Vaccine Initiative. And they are investing in vaccine safety mainly. And there are others, but these are I would say, the big players that I'm aware of. We also have the governmental donors, and there among them the USAID. They have a big program, the CEAPS program, that I will also return to later. And also European Union, they have invested in research, also with the FP7, the Framework Program 7, and now in the next time frame is Horizon 2020, they call it. And one of those projects I have been coordinating, it's called the Monitoring Medicines Project. And there we had a lot of pharmacovigilance centers involved: Sweden, Switzerland, Denmark, Ghana, Kenya, Morocco, Netherlands, Philippines, and so on. So that was a specific project funded by the European Union. And then other national donor agencies that might be interested in funding pharmacovigilance. Coming back to Global Fund, it took them a long time to realize that pharmacovigilance was important. So it was only in connection with the 10th round where they invited countries to apply for funding for HIV, AIDS, tuberculosis, and malaria, that they actually started demanding pharmacovigilance activities. So now, on the Global Fund website, you see under quality assurance information that they are specifically mentioning pharmacovigilance as an important component. And they also contributed by working with WHO to work out this document. It's a 2-pager. I don't know if it's been shown to you already. You have seen it. The minimum requirements for a functional pharmacovigilance system. Because from the Global Fund side, they wanted to say that this is the minimum. If you don't have this in place, you will have to build it. Otherwise, you cannot receive funding for medicines from us. So that was a very strong pressure. And from the UMC side, we could see that some countries, all of a sudden, they had funding to come for our training courses. So it made a difference. And that is as of 2012, no, 10. We noticed the difference. That's when they introduced this. And when you apply to the Global Fund, you can do it in various ways. It can be disease-focused. You can say that I want to have a special intervention to focus on TB or HIV and so on. Or it can be general for health system strengthening. And I know Vietnam, for example, they got a grant from the Global Fund for Health Systems Strengthening, focusing on pharmacovigilance. Or if you have new technology introductions, if you are going to introduce a new medicine or a new vaccine, you can also apply for some safety monitoring process in that connection. And if you do that, if you go for introduction of new drugs or vaccines, you have to specify a procurement and supply management plan. And it's a big guideline on how you do this. It's actually quite complicated. But what is good is down here you have a line for pharmacovigilance. And it states under 2.7, is there a system for monitoring adverse drug reactions, that is pharmacovigilance? If yes, describe briefly how the system works. If no, describes plan to establish a system. They are at least taking pharmacovigilance seriously, which we are extremely happy about. It's pushing countries to introduce pharmacovigilance through public health programs, and we can see the difference. Then I want to spend a few words on what Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation have done. They had a series of international meetings, and they came out with this report of the Safety and Surveillance Working Group. They came with a report in 2014, but the meetings that took place were in 2012. But their analysis is quite interesting. Okay, this is one. Because they are looking at new products that are in the pipeline, that are likely to be introduced in low and middle income countries the next 5 years. This is a map for the period 2012 to 15, and they have similar maps for time periods after this. And they are looking at product launches assessed by relative risk. So the highest risk products, they are in the red countries here. So this is where you are likely to get probably, say, malaria vaccines in Africa, possibly dengue vaccines over here, bedaquiline for tuberculosis, for example, you get all over the place. But then they matched this with analysis of the pharmacovigilance capacity in countries. And their rating was that the highest capacity is in Nigeria, in Uganda, India, and Vietnam. And the others have very shaky pharmacovigilance systems. And that makes Gates Foundation a bit concerned, because they have invested heavily in many of these products, many of these vaccines and medicines that are going to be introduced the coming years. And they're saying we are taking a big risk if we are just rolling them out without any safety net, any monitoring system. And their model, what they wish to achieve, is to have a joint ownership, that the donors, the marketing authorization holders of these products, the producers and the regulatory authorities, they should come together. And the donors are prepared to do some catalytic funding, which should be limited and short-lived. But there should be local country ownership from the outside. I like that. If the donors can get the regulatory authorities or the country authorities on board, and together we sustainable systems, and then the donors want to wriggle out of that, and the country authorities, they should own it. And there should be funding, self-sustaining and long-term. And the whole idea of this report from the group is that you should not have a product-oriented monitoring. It should be systems. Systems should be built in countries to allow for multiple entry of products. And they have formed a trust fund under the World Bank with contributions. I don't know to what extent this has happened, that governments, marketing authorizations have contributed to this together with the donors. But that's the idea. And the trust fund is there. And they also want to work with regional implementation partners, and they want to have technical support from WHO and other technical agencies. And they wish to have an advisory committee on how to use this trust fund. And they also want indicator-based monitoring and evaluation. So that is the model from the Gates Foundation. And they just a couple of weeks ago came to WHO and also to UMC to discuss how we can work together on this. So that is in the pipeline. Then we have the SIAPS project, Systems for Improved Access to Pharmaceuticals and Services, which also has a component on pharmacovigilance. It's funded by the USAID, and it's implemented by Management Sciences for Health, MSH, which is an organization from the US. They have offices in many countries. They work with, they have focus countries. They don't work with all countries. And according to the SIAP's website, these are the countries they are particularly focused on. Many of them are African, but also this would be Afghanistan, I think, up here. And this is Ukraine, Bangladesh, and Philippines. They have done also in pharmacovigilance, as I have shown already, where they use the IPAT indicator tool to assess 46 countries in Africa, and they did the similar kind of assessment for 5 countries in Asia. And if you really want to know more of how the SIAPS project is supporting pharmacovigilance, you can go to this website and read more about it. I don't think it's the right time to elaborate more on the details. There are other ways of trying to align and work with other organizations so that you might join forces and get resources. I have always been a bit, envious or impressed by the way the French pharmacovigilance system has been built. Because if I get it right, at least from the beginning, they have some 32 regional centers all over France, where they co-organize pharmacovigilance with, say, drug information or poison information. And there they have co-funding from universities or hospitals. And I think that's a good way of joining forces and also joining resources in cost sharing. There are also ways of applying for fellowships for training. We have had great difficulties when we have had many people applying for our training courses over the years, and when we have admitted them, they have ultimately had to cancel because they have not been able to find the funding. And some have been funded by organizations of pharmaceutical companies. This is always a bit controversial, because when you're in pharmacovigilance, you need to be objective. You don't need to have any conflict of interest. So being funded by a single pharmaceutical industry is perhaps not advisable. But I can see that if you're funded by the organization of pharmaceutical industry, there is no particular individual company that you have a tie to. So that might be okay. You also have a site that I will show you called PharmaBridge, where they give you ideas of where you can apply for fellowships. So if you go to this is from the International Pharmaceutical Federation's website, FIP. This is the URL, and here you have a list of different organizations that are offering fellowships. I don't know what the competition is. Probably huge. But one can always try. And then finally, crowdfunding. I don't think anyone has ever tried this, but it's a new facility that organizations, small organizations, but also quite big organizations are using to fund specific projects. If you go to Wikipedia, you can read that crowdfunding is the practice of funding a project or venture by raising monetary contributions from a large number of people, typically via the internet. And I think the chance of having this as a funding source is possible only in countries where internet use is very high. The way you do it is you can use a crowdfunding platform, and there are many of them. And then you have a story, what you want to do. And in this case, it was they wanted to help prevent the shortage of vaccines in third world countries. And then you define how much money you want to achieve this. So this is the sum we want to fund, to collect, and you have a time frame. Within the next 2 or 3 months, this is what we want to have in order to achieve this. And then you promote it, and the platform helps you to promote your program. And these are various platforms for crowdfunding that you can refer to. And they also, of course, they have a commission. So there is a fee, normally some 5% of what you gain you will have to pay to this platform. I would be very interested if any one of you would try it and see how it works. I'm sure you need to have quite an attractive project, but I think we have attractive ideas about reducing the risk of harm from medicines. So to sum it up, I'm feeling that strategies you might be able to follow, and this is really referring to what we said in the previous session. Do research on the burden of medicine-related harm and how pharmacovigilance can reduce it. That getting that fact, getting those data, is a way of impressing on the politicians and the decision makers if we are focusing on getting public funding. And particularly if we can show that pharmacovigilance is there to reduce the costs, to help in using medicines in a more rational way, to reduce wastes and reduce harm. I think that is the best argument we can have. And then, because the donors are not supporting regulatory agencies, they are supporting public health programs in countries. So if you can join forces and collaborate with public health programs, and we have seen that in several countries, that TB programs working with a regulatory authority, HIV/AIDS programs working with the regulatory authority, all of a sudden they realize that they have common interests, and working together is a win-win. And we have seen how pharmacovigilance has improved in several countries in Africa because of such collaborations. And you can then also write joint project proposals for the donors. Approach donors together, and they like that. So I think that is a good way forward for those countries that have public health programs. Not all of us have that. And then partnerships. Like the examples I gave with WHO and European Union funding in the Monitoring Medicines project. Work with technical support organizations like the WHO and collaborating centers, because they sometimes get donor funding that they can then mediate and channel to countries. And then also to work with universities, healthcare facilities in kind of reducing cost by sharing costs. And then I also feel that it's important that you document and publish your work. Because if you're not seen, if you're not there in the public eye, in the media, somehow you don't exist. So whatever we do, we have to also be in the public domain to talk about it. And then we can impress on the decision makers and say, yes, this is something we want to fund and support. And be creative. You cannot always expect others to solve issues of funding for you, because there might be opportunities around you that no one else has thought of. And it's not always just big money that we are looking for. Just small money for a project can take you a long way, because then you can, with that project, you can get facts that help you to impress on decision makers. So thank you for your attention. Sorry I didn't have any money to offer to you, but at least some leads.